Okay, it's Kelly and I'm Bob, and we're back on Time for Forgiveness. And we are so energized to bring a very, very compelling story today. So much emotion, so many different emotions are going to be shared today through this gentleman. And it all takes us back to the World Trade Centers and the attack that day. And we're going to bring you right into what happened inside that building. And Kelly, go ahead and introduce our guest.
I want to introduce you to Michael Hingson. He is a speaker and a New York Times best-selling author, and he does have a compelling story that I know is going to change your life today. So thank you for being here with us. Michael has been blind since birth. He was on the 78th floor in the World Trade Center of Tower 1 in North Tower, and he was guided out by his guide dog, Roselle. He survived the attack, but it's just the start of his incredible story. He is now helping people understand what vision really means. Michael, we were talking about that you have the ability to take people back in that building with you so they can experience what you did, unfortunately, the day of the attack. And I'm wondering if you could take us there.
Sure. So in doing so, I realized a long time ago, we now have a whole generation of people who have no memory of the World Trade Center. And for everyone else, your view primarily is as large as your TV screen or your newspaper. So people started asking me enough questions that I realized that I needed to try to make it real in a positive way for people. So on September 11th, I was in my office at 8:45. Literally, I was reaching for stationery because we were creating a list of the people who were going to be attending some seminars that day, and you have to create that list on letterhead and fax it to the Port Authority security people. So I was literally reaching for stationery when suddenly we heard kind of a muffled thump, and the building shuddered, and then it literally began tipping in one direction. And as I describe it to people, we probably tipped about 20 feet
Mm.
Wow.
before the building stopped.
That,
And well, but the reason that it tipped is that, and it's something that I had learned because I spent a lot of time learning all I could about the World Trade Center. I was the leader of an office. And so it was important for me to know what to do because I couldn't necessarily rely on sighted people. Not that I don't have any faith in sighted people, but I might be in the office. I might be in the office alone because I wanted my staff out selling and supporting rather than being in the office. But also, um, if something happened and we were in a room or in an area that was filled with smoke or where people couldn't read the signs on the walls, and that's all they're going to do to prepare is look at the signs on the walls, then somebody has to know what to do.
mhm.
So I made it a point to know what to do. And so I spent time, as I said, with the Port Authority security people, the police, the fire department, and everyone I could. And not only that, I walked all around the World Trade Center and learned all I could about where everything was in the complex, where different offices were, and so on. So the building tipped because the tall buildings like the towers and the buildings today are made with expansion joints because they need to be able to buffet or tip or move in windstorms.
Mhm.
And in fact, the Empire State Building was struck by an airplane in the 1940s. It was a military aircraft. It was an accident. It got lost in a fog bank. But no one expected a plane filled with 26,000 pounds of jet fuel to crash into the towers deliberately. So the reality is that that's what caused the building to collapse eventually. The exploding jet fuel caused so much more damage to the infrastructure that no matter how much the building tipped when it was struck by an airplane, the exploding jet fuel did so much more damage. But I reached for stationary and we felt the building shudder and begin to tip. And then it came back. And as soon as it did, I went into my office. As soon as the building began to tip, I went to the doorway. I grew up in an area where we had earthquakes in California, and I learned early on building moves, go stand in doorway. Yeah, that really works on the 78th floor, but that's what I did.
Well,
So,
Michael, what was your initial thought? Like, what the heck is going on here? What ran through your
well,
mind?
right, and that, I was just getting that. Thank you. When the building tipped, I thought maybe it was an explosion, even though it wasn't very loud. And I was with a colleague from our corporate office, David Frank, who said, "No, um, it didn't sound like an explosion. Was it an earthquake?" And I said, "No, because the building wasn't shaking around; it was going in one direction." So we didn't know. And frankly, for me, although I didn't realize it till much later, a mindset kicked in. That is to say, having learned all the things that I did, I knew what to do in an emergency. I knew what the options were. And so when the building began to tip, even though I was standing in the doorway, the mindset kicked in and said, you know what to do.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
when the building got vertical again, I went back into my office. I met Roselle, my guide dog, coming out from under my desk. I took her leash. I told her to heel, which meant to come around on my left side and sit. And about the time she did that, the building dropped straight down about 6 feet.
Oh.
Now that's because the expansion joints went back to their normal configuration. We spent the next hour going to the stairwell. We had some guests. We got them to the stairs first. David saw fire above us after um, the building dropped. He turned and looked out the window and started shouting to me, "Oh my God, Mike, there's fire and smoke above us. There are millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside the window." And we knew that something was going on. I
Hmm.
heard things brushing by the building, and now I knew what they were: millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside the window. That's what David described. But the reality is that finally I kept telling David to slow down, and David finally said, "You don't understand. We got to get out of here right now. You can't see it." The usual line. The reality is, it wasn't what I wasn't seeing, it was what David wasn't seeing, namely a dog who was sitting next to me, wagging her tail, yawning, and going, "Who woke me up? I was sleeping real good here, folks."
So
And,
let me ask you really quick.
you know,
I'm
eh,
guessing that no one else had your mindset of I know what to do right now. I'm
I
guessing there
suspect.
is absolute chaos around you.
Well, there wasn't chaos, like,
Hmm.
because people in my office heard me telling David to slow down. And then I finally got David to focus. I said, "Get our guests to the stairs. Don't let them take the elevators." And he did that. Meanwhile, I tried to call my wife, and I called her and got her and told her there had been an explosion or something, but we didn't know what.
Did
And
when
we
did
were
you
going to be
become
leaving
aware that actually what happened, Michael, that the building had been struck by a plane?
after both towers had collapsed. Look, the reality is we were 18 floors below where the building was struck on average. um, and on the other side of the building. There
Mhm.
was no way for me nor anyone else on my side of the building to know what happened,
Mm, mhm,
because the last time I checked, X-ray vision and Superman are fiction and not real.
mm,
And the reality is we had no idea what happened. And as we went down the stairs later, the fact is nobody knew. But after about 4 floors of walking on the stairwell, I realized I was smelling an odor, and it took me a while to realize what it was. And when I figured out it was the fumes from burning jet fuel, and I observed that to other people, they said, "Yeah, we were trying to figure out what it is. You're right, it's burning jet fuel. We must have been hit by an airplane." But look, no one knew, because
mhm,
we were on the opposite side of the building and well below where the planes hit. People, of course, tell me all the time, "Well, you didn't know because you couldn't see it." And as I said, the last time I checked, X-ray vision's not real. The fact is, nobody knew. And for
Well,
me, I never learned the truth until after both towers had collapsed.
was was anybody in your building able to see building 2 and any?
No, by
Okay.
the time, well, let me rephrase that. By the time we got to the stairs and we started down, we were kind of in our own little cocoon going down. We didn't even feel any vibration from Tower 2 being hit. We were all in the stairwell. And so around us, no one knew. Now, firefighters started passing us at the 30th floor, but they wouldn't tell us what happened.
Mhm,
I like information. I wish they had told me, but they didn't know me. So, I understand why they wouldn't. And they wanted to escort me down the stairs, and I resisted that because they're a team, and firefighters had to carry all their equipment up the stairs with them to be able to fight fires. And the reason is, if you put the equipment somewhere, what if the fire broke out below where you put the equipment? You couldn't get to it anyway. So they had to carry the equipment up. I was not about to break up a team. More important, firefighters don't know how to assist a blind person going downstairs, sighted guide anyway. And finally, they couldn't help me go down the stairs, because the reality is there's only so much room on the stairs. I got a stair rail, I got a guide dog. I don't need that kind of help going down the stairs. So we finally convinced the firefighters that we were okay, and they went on up the stairs as we went down, and we finally made it to the bottom. And when we got into the lobby, there were the guy with the bullhorn going, "Go this way! No, don't go that way! Don't go outside!" And we learned later that the reason they didn't want anyone going to the outside from Tower 2, from Tower 1, is that would have probably put them right below where people were jumping. So they wanted everyone to
Mm.
go into the central part of the complex and go all the way through it and out as far away from the towers as they could be.
Wow.
So I know, I mean, intellectually, I know that guide dogs are trained, but just they obviously are sensing that this is enormous stress and things are happening. And it amazes me that Roselle just kept it together and was able to take you down those stairs.
Well, understand that's not her job. Her job is to make sure that I walk safely, not to know where to go or how to get there.
Hmm.
So they don't take anyone anywhere. They don't lead people, they guide. And their job is to make sure that we walk safely. And there was a fair amount of time on the stairwell that I couldn't even use Roselle's harness because it was so crowded. There was just no space for us to walk side by side. So I was in front and she was behind, and I was just holding onto her leash in the stair rail. But the the reality is that Roselle focused because I encouraged her. I kept telling her, "Good dog, what a good job, good
Hmm.
girl," all the way down the stairs. And people heard that and followed me down the stairs because I was sounding calm and supporting Roselle. And I
Right.
actually met people later in other states who said, "We were on the stairwell behind you, and we figured that if you could go down those stairs calm, we were going to follow you." And that's what they did.
And so how do you remain calm? Because that's not just one time in your life. That's probably how you do one thing, you do all things. And you're blind and you aren't really aware of what's happening and you're calm. I'm
Well, how do
just
you, well, okay, but I wasn't any more or any less aware than anyone else. And blindness doesn't have anything to do with it. It's still ultimately knowledge. And the problem with most people is they don't prepare for emergencies. And even if they do physical preparations, like we had fires here, last month, and people talk about being prepared. But what most people never are is mentally prepared for the potential that something unexpected could happen to them. And
Hmm.
for me, I've taught myself how to focus and deal with fear in general. And that's why I wrote my latest book, Live Like a Guide Dog: True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs About Being Brave, Overcoming Adversity, and Moving Forward in Faith. It's all about the reality that you can learn to control fear. And rather than letting it, as I would put it, blind or paralyze you or overwhelm you, you can use fear as a very powerful tool to help you focus and not let it take over your being so that you can't make decisions. And I learned to do that. Heck, I was in Boston for a while. I lived in the Boston area. You want to talk about surprises every day. At that time, per capita, Boston and Massachusetts drivers, especially in Boston, were the worst drivers in the country. I could have a clear field to cross a street, but as I'm crossing the street, suddenly I hear a car coming down the street or whizzing around a corner, and I got to run to get out of its way. And I learned to listen for those things. So I learned to be open to um, surprises that could come along and learn to not let any of those things kind of overwhelm me. And so in Boston, if I heard a car coming, I had to make very swift decisions. Do I go back to the curb or do I continue crossing the street? Depending on where I was and where I heard the car, it would be the determining factor as to what I did. But the fact of the matter is that you can learn to focus and not let unexpected, horrible things overwhelm you. We fear everything. I mean, we want to what if everything that comes along. And the reality is there are so many things that happen to us over which we have no control. I don't believe that we had any way to predict that the World Trade Center events were going to happen. We had no control over that, but we all have control over how we deal with it. I met one person who originally was a firefighter, and after the World Trade Center, his brother had been killed in the attacks. He decided to become a policeman, and his choice was, I want to be a policeman so I can kill terrorists who killed my brother. I wouldn't want to make that decision that way.
Hmm.
And I've lost friends in the World Trade Center, but when we talk about forgiveness. The reality is that what happened happened, and the issue is how do we move forward? Do we want vengeance? Do we want to be mean and angry,
Hmm.
or do we want to use it as a learning experience and be able to grow and move forward? Which is what I choose to do, and what I choose to tell audiences when I travel and speak today.
Well, that's a great. Um, I love how you kind of frame that, Michael, because whether it's what you went through or what Kelly and I went through or anybody else went through, it's always focus because what we focus on expands. And
Right.
that typically drives the meaning of the event. And you were able to shift the meaning into something positive, and you've used it to spread a great message and help people learn and grow. And so I really appreciate what you're saying.
Well, the World Trade Center events were a tragedy, but the issue still is how we deal with that tragedy. And the
Hmm.
fact of the matter is, we can all use it as a way to move forward, become stronger, and work to see that this doesn't happen again. Now we're living in an environment where we have a series of politicians who just say, "Trust me," and they're not doing anything to earn our trust. And we shouldn't trust someone just because they say, "Trust me." Dogs, for example, do love unconditionally. I believe that, but they don't trust unconditionally. But the difference between dogs and people in general is that dogs are open to developing a trusting relationship. They want to find someone who will tell them what the rules are and what's expected of them. And they do better when they have that. And that's supposed to be us. But we have to earn their trust and they have to earn our trust. And I think instinctively they know that. They know that. For me, I believe working with a guide dog and developing that kind of close bond and two-way trust takes a year. It isn't something that happens overnight, but dogs are open to trust, and we should learn to be more open. And if people don't earn our trust, then fine, we move on. But by the same token, we shouldn't hate a person just because they didn't earn our trust. Now we
Hmm.
know better. But if they earn our trust, and we can earn their trust, what a relationship that is.
Well, I think that's a big word when you're talking about trust because, we also have to trust the process. Things in our lives that happen, like you said, sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes it's the unexpected. We wouldn't ask for it. How do you use that, I guess, trust in your own life in regards to these events?
Well, the reality is there's a lot to trust. We live in houses or buildings that have roofs on them. We trust that the roof isn't going to collapse. Trust is all around us. And we have to take charge of what we trust and how we trust. And I believe that anyone who wants our trust has to earn it, not just say trust me, and then expect that we do that. And I think that's part of the problem that we have is that we've got so many people who just say trust me, and unfortunately a lot of people do, and then they get burned because they didn't earn or they didn't get someone to earn their trust. And I think that's extremely important. Any of us are going to do a lot better if we really are open to the idea of trust, if we learn to understand trust. And then when somebody shows us that we should earn their trust, then that's a good thing. And how do we do that? Well, one thing to do and is at night when you're going to sleep, think about the day, analyze the day, be introspective. Look at what happened today. Why did this work well? Why did that not necessarily work well? I don't like the term failure because it's not productive, and it isn't a failure. It's something didn't happen the way we expected, and so we learn from that. But we have to make the decision to think about what happened and why and how do we move forward. Why was I afraid of that? What do I do about that? Or even the things that went well, could I have done something to make that even go better? But we have to make those decisions to analyze that, and developing that mind muscle is what it's really all about. And
Yeah.
it's just something that we don't do nearly as much as we really should.
Michael, I want to ask you because you had this plane came in 17 floors above where you were. Um, how did you process the fact that if the plane would have hit below where you were, you probably wouldn't be here today. So there's this idea of it's random, but is it really random? And then this idea that why this person, some friends you had didn't make it, you did. How did you work through that? I'm just curious.
One of the things that happened to me when Tower 2 was collapsing, we were 100 yards away from it. And everyone turned and ran. David, who was with me, turned and ran. We caught up to each other later. But as soon as I turned around and started running back the way we came to get away from the collapsing tower, I thought to myself, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us. And I heard in my head, as clearly as you're hearing me now, a voice that said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself. And I had this absolute sense of conviction that if we worked together, we'd be fine. And that's the real issue. Um, I didn't have any control over what might have happened if the plane had hit like on the 77th or in the 70th floor. Um, I would have still probably done my best to try to get out. And if I couldn't, I couldn't. But the reality is that's the what if thing I'm talking about. What good is it going to be to talk about, well, why did I survive and somebody else didn't? The issue isn't why I survived. The issue is what I'm going to do because I survived. And when people started asking me to come and speak and to talk about the various lessons that I've learned, what I realized is selling life and philosophy, and my wife and I both agreed on this, that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more fun and rewarding than managing a computer hardware sales team and selling
There you go.
computer hardware. And so by
Oh, come
beginning of
on, Michael.
2002, I was doing it full time. Come on, not
Yeah,
rewarding.
I would
But
concur with
that
that. Yeah.
yeah, I know. But that's hey, nothing wrong with selling hardware, but it's the reality is that we have choices to make, and it gets back to I didn't have any control over where that plane went. And worrying about why did I survive and somebody else didn't isn't really the issue. The issue is I survived. What am I going to
What are
do
you gonna
about
do?
it? What am I going to do to improve? One of the things that I
And that's
used
a
to
big
always say,
question. That is a really big question for so many people that have experienced some unexpected or tragedy in their life, that it's a very powerful question to start asking
Well, how are we
yourself.
going to use it, right? And
well, how are we going to
Michael
use
used it
it?
in a positive way to help transform other lives. But that's the choice, that's the decision, and we make those decisions every day. Yours just
But I
happened to
think
be in
there's
something
some,
that the whole
I
world
think
knew about,
there's a lot of people that have experienced tragedies that do not feel they have the power or control to make that kind of
or the
decision.
capacity,
Yeah.
Well,
the
but they
emotional
do,
capacity.
but they do, but they haven't developed it, and that's the issue.
Right.
And so it's something that I've done my whole life. And as I said, what actually happened on September 11th was because of all the things that I learned being in the World Trade Center, and all the things that I learned because I chose to learn those things, um, had a mindset that kicked in. One of the things that I've said for years, and it goes back to college, is I'm my own worst critic. I listen to every speech I give, and I always used to say, I'm my own worst critic. I got to listen to it. I got to listen to it because I want to hear what I said and all that. It's only within the last year that I realized I'm my own worst critic is absolutely the wrong thing to say. The fact is, nobody else can teach me anything. They can provide me with information, but I have to be the one to teach myself. And so I'm not my own worst critic, I'm my own best teacher.
Hmm.
And when you start to look at it that way, you develop a whole different attitude and orientation toward mindsets.
Well, we
But
always
the
say,
fact,
Michael, that everything is not, it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. So I think
well, it is.
when we shift our perception on it, Wayne Dyer had a great quote. He said, when you change the way you look at a thing, the thing changes. So
But
And
sometimes we
that's
have to
why it's,
But
shift our perspective.
you've said the word mindset multiple times throughout, and we use it as well. But someone listening might go, I don't really understand. How do you describe, what does that mean to you, mindset?
it's really an attitude. It's the way you think. It's what you choose to believe and what happens to you. And it's you training your mind to react in different kinds of
Hmm.
situations,
Well, thoughts,
including
feelings, and
surprises.
actions. There, you just described it. Thoughts,
But it,
feelings,
but
feelings
but
control
it's
our
all about
actions.
surprises. It's all
Yeah.
about surprises. You can learn to control your reaction to surprises. You can learn to control how you deal with situations, and you can learn to not look at things in a negative way. I mean, there are a lot of people who hate our current president. That's not going to help anyone. And the reality is, you're not going to be able to control him. Anyway, the fact is, though, there's one time that you have a say in that. Well, there are two. We have the 2026 elections coming up next year, and then in 2 years we have the 3 years we have the 2028 elections. But the reality is that we can fret and grouse and groan and complain about everything that is going on, or we can worry about our own lives to make sure that we're doing as best as we can and making positive choices. And I believe that anytime we look at things in a positive light, and I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna, but if we look at things and recognize those things over which we have control and we work on those and we stop worrying about everything else, we will become so much less fearful of the world.
I believe that I am remembering this correctly, that you visited the 10-year anniversary and kind of spent a moment with your grief there.
Well, it wasn't the 10th, but yeah, I've been back to the site, and I
Okay.
spent in 2017. Actually, I spent time in the museum. I was in New York in May of 2002, and actually had the opportunity to drive down into what that time was the pit, going down to the seventh sublevel because the buildings and the debris had all been cleared away. It was a strange feeling to be there. And then the next time I really spent time at the World Trade Center site was in 2017 when we went to the World Trade Center Museum and so on.
Hmm.
And actually, at the museum, they have an exhibit of the animals of September 11th, and Roselle's collar is in that museum. So
Oh,
anybody who goes to the museum, go down to the basement and you'll see the animal exhibit, and her
No,
collar's
I love
there.
that. That's really so, Michael. What do you mentioned right at the beginning that there's a whole nother generation or new generation of people that really aren't that aware of that day, what happened, and the meaning behind it and the consequences. Therefore, what would you want people watching this conversation to know about 9/11?
What I would want people to know is that, in fact, when things happen to you, you have control over how you deal with them. You both talked about it a little bit earlier. So many people don't feel empowered, and don't feel that they can make decisions. Yes, they can, but they have to learn it. It's a mind muscle that has to be developed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and that's why, again, that's why I wrote Live Like a Guide Dog. And some of it's also in Thunderdog, the other book that I wrote that was a New York Times bestseller years before. But the fact of the matter is, we can learn to control fear. We can learn to control how we deal with things. And the power and the inner voice that is within us are all available to us to learn all of this and to be able to move forward in a positive and productive way.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to make that choice. No one can make that choice for
hmm.
us.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I opened and I was introducing, it was kind of like this was the start of the story, but you're now teaching people what vision really means. And I think a lot of people hold a vision around the idea of forgiveness. And it's maybe what they've been conditioned to see growing up, or they just have heard, or it's society telling them, you could never forgive that. And so I don't think that we always see these circumstances clearly because we may not see everything in the circumstance. So I'm asking, I guess, what is your vision around forgiveness?
I think that just to expect forgiveness, well, you should forgive me for what I did. I think that, like respect, forgiveness also has to be earned. Um, you can choose to totally forgive someone and say, um, I'm going to put that in the past, and that's great. You should do that. But I think also part of forgiveness, to a very large degree, is something where somebody needs to recognize that they have to earn your forgiveness, and you have to and can totally control how you deal with things, and you can decide you're going to move on. You're not going to let this affect you in a negative way. Look, we had 19 terrorists who did what they did on September 11th. We have other terrorists that do what they do. We have a number of people, but that's not a religious thing. They want to use it in the name of religion, but it's not an Islamic thing. It's terrorists, it's thugs who decided that they want to control the world and they're going to tell us all what to do. By the way, no different than the Christians during the Crusades in 1066, right? The fact of the matter is, too many people do things in the name of religion. Should we forgive them? we should understand them, and then we can choose to forgive them. And they may not ask for forgiveness because they think they're right. But the reality is that forgiveness may also include being prepared for the person who doesn't care whether you forgive them or not.
Mm.
Um, but you have control over how you deal with any situation, including how you interact with people. From my perspective, as I said, what happened on September 11th is not an Islamic thing, it's a terrorist thing. And there have been so many of those. But I know many Muslims, and we're good friends. And their belief is peace, like our belief is peace. But if someone chooses not to do that, and I've had people who betrayed my trust over the years, and my choice is, all right, I know that I can't trust you. I'm not going to hate you. I'm going to basically put you out of my life if I can, and move forward. And if that's part of forgiveness, then that's great. But the reality is hating and being a person with a lot of animosity towards someone just because of the way they behave, that doesn't help either. So do
Yep.
I hate Donald Trump just because I don't agree with his policies? No. Do I hate Joe Biden because I didn't agree with some of his policies? No. But by the same token, I think that it's always important to understand other people, and then you make the choices as to how you progress and move on.
Mm.
But you do it in a positive way.
Well, I love how your main theme is that it's a decision and you
It
make your own
is.
decisions. You live with the consequences. But Michael, we're running up on our time, but you're such an
I forgive you
inspiration.
for saying that.
Y- y- You are a true inspiration. I have never really spoken with somebody who came out of those towers, and so it was an honor to get to interact with you today. And you're such a patriot. Where can our audience find your books and more about you?
Well, they can go to Michael Hingson, MichaelHingson.com, and they can buy books wherever they buy books. You can buy them from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or whatever. They're available on Audible. Thunderdog, Running with Roselle, and Live Like a Guide Dog. If they're interested in asking me to come and speak, um, I do travel and speak. I was actually in Louisiana and Texas last week, freezing, but it was still fun.
Well, come
And
to Kansas
and
City. You would have known what
yeah,
real
well,
cold
yeah,
was.
it was even colder, but
Yeah.
but the bottom line is it is what I do, and I would love to talk to anybody who's looking for a speaker and would love to work with people. They can reach out to me through the website or email me at speaker, SPEAKER, at Michael Hingson, MichaelHingson.com, speaker at michaelhingson.com. And by the way, we also have a podcast on which
Yeah.
we're going to draft you guys to come on next week, actually. And the podcast is called Unstoppable Mindset. Moving from, well, it's Unstoppable Mindset. Um, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. The reason it's worded that way is that people who talk about diversity never talk about disabilities. We forgive them for that, but by the same token, they don't get top billing anymore. If you're going to talk about disabilities, then you're going to be inclusive. And you can't be partially inclusive. You either are or you're not. My
Mm.
master's degree is in physics, and I claim the quantum state either you are or you're not inclusive. There's no middle ground. But the reality is that if anybody wants to be on the podcast, love to hear from you as well. Email me and would love to have you guys on. Of course,
All
you're going to
right.
be on next week, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this unexpected conversation. So I appreciate all
That's
your.
let me just say, the reason it's inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected is most of what we talk about is the unexpected. That doesn't have anything to do with inclusion or diversity, which is most people. So there you go.
Well, good. I'm looking forward to it. And again, I want to appreciate you being here and sharing this incredible story with our audience. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.